In this video, I'm going to show you how I frog and tink when I need to undo a portion of my knitting. Frogging is the term used when you take the stitches off of the needle and rip back. And tinking is the term used when you unknit individual stitches one by one. I combine frogging and tinking when I need to undo at least several rows of knitting. In this demonstration, I will show you how I do this when I'm working flat as well as when I'm working in the round. Let's start with flat knitting. So I have a little swatch here, and let's say I want to undo, let's say about an inch or so. First, I'm going to take the stitches off of the needle. And then I'm just going to start ripping. And if you're curious why it's called frogging, it's because rip is the sound a frog makes. Okay, so let's say that is about one row or so before where I would want my stitches back on the needle. So I'm going to end making sure that my working yarn is on this side. I'm going to be tinking them this way. So to start, as you can see, my working yarn is over here on the third stitch. So I'm just going to make sure to put the first two stitches onto my needle just like that. And then I'm going to tink the rest of the stitches one by one. So to tink, I'm just going to take my needle tip and I'm going to go into the stitch that this stitch is coming out of. So I'm going to go into this loop right here. And then I just take the working yarn and I pull it out like that. But this way I'm securing the stitch before I take it off. So I'm going to take the needle, I'm going to go into this loop right here, and then take the yarn like that. Take the needle, put it into this stitch, this loop here, then take the working yarn. So as you can see, this is the tinking component where I'm going stitch by stitch. And I could have done this for all of those rows that I ripped, but obviously this is a much faster way if you need to undo several rows. So first I just easily rip back to just before I want my stitches back on the needle. And that way I'm only having to tink one row versus having to tink many rows. And sometimes the last stitch can look a little tricky of where is it coming out of. So sometimes I'll go like this and I'll start to close it and I see, oh, okay, it's coming out of this loop right here. So I will secure that and then take it off. And so now my stitches are back on the needle. My yarn is here, so I'm ready to work a right side row. Now, before we move on to the other demonstration, let me show you how you would tink back if you were tinking the other way. So if we were tinking with the wrong side of the work facing us like this. So in this demonstration, I'm going to be showing you how you would tink when the stitches are already on the needle like this. So let's say I had secured all the stitches, but I decided, you know what, I want to go back one more row. And this time the wrong side is facing me. So similarly, we want to go into the loop that the stitch on the needle is coming out of. So in this first stitch, I can see it's coming out of this loop here. And so I just take that off and then pull it. And then for the next one, it's coming out of this loop. So I secure it on the left needle first, then take the stitch off the right needle, and then take it off like that. So this would be tinking on the wrong side with the purl stitches. Again, just going into that loop and then taking it off. Now let's do a sample of in the round frogging and tinking. So I have a sample of in the round knitting here. Now the big difference is that before I start frogging, I want to place a locking stitch marker at the beginning of round area at around the spot I want to frog back to. Because unlike flat knitting, it can be a little trickier to know where your beginning of round is. So before I take any stitches off the needle, what I want to do, I'm going to take a locking stitch marker. And if, let's say, I want to go down, let's say about 3/4 of an inch or so, maybe an inch of frogging down here, I'm going to look. And so my beginning of round is right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this locking stitch marker and I'm going to go right into this stitch. So I'll know that this column of stitches here, this is going to be my first stitch, that the beginning of round is going to be right before this stitch right here. Okay, so then I'm going to clasp the marker shut. And so now I am just going to take all of the stitches off of the circular. Including the beginning of round marker. And just like the flat swatch, first, I'm just going to do the frogging, so the ripping out part. So I'm just going to do this until I get close to where I had placed that locking stitch marker. So I'm pretty close to where my marker is at this point. And one thing I wanted to point out too, once you get close to this area, you want to make sure that the yarn is going in this direction. So going to the right. So as you can see, as I'm pulling out these stitches, it's going in this direction. So now that I'm at around the marker, so I know that this is going to be, this stitch right here is going to be the start of my round, but because we're going to be tinking, we're kind of starting with the end of that round and then we'll make our way back. So what I'm going to do is I want to start at this point right here. So right to the right of the marker, I'm going to take my circular. And because this is done in a 2x2 rib, I'm going to be tinking both knitwise and purlwise. And to start, I can tell that these are purl stitches because the yarn is in the front here and you can see the purl bumps here. So first I'm going to secure this stitch by going in here with my needle, just like that, and then taking the working yarn and pulling it out. And I'll do the same thing with the next stitch and then pull it out. Now these are knit stitches and I can tell because the yarn is coming from the back. So I'm going to bring the yarn to the back of the work. And again, just like we had done with the flat knitting, I'm going to go into this loop here and then undo, go into this loop here and undo. Then these are purls. And then these are knits. And so I would just continue in this manner until I've come back around to where my locking stitch marker is. And as you can see, we have a lot of stitches on the needles here. So if I had individually tinked each of those rounds, it would have taken me quite a while. But this way, I was able to quickly rip back, and now I just need to tink this one individual round. So I'm just coming back around here. So it looks like I only have a couple stitches. And sometimes when you get back to the beginning of round, see how my yarn is already over here and I haven't secured that stitch. That can sometimes happen as you get to the beginning of round. So I'm just going to make sure to take that loop and get it onto my left needle just like that. And then for this last stitch, that actually is what my locking stitch marker is attached to. This might not always happen depending on where exactly you would place that locking marker, but in my case, that's where it had attached. And so I'll just take that loop and put it right on the needle, and then I can undo the locking marker. And so now I am back with all of my stitches. Here I have all of this. So what I'll do, because it's a lot, I'll just rewind it back into the ball like this, But otherwise, I can take my beginning of round marker again, place it on, and then I'm ready to just continue knitting just like I had been. So that is how you utilize both frogging and tinking when you need to undo several rows or rounds or more of knitting. Happy knitting!